This is a Montie Moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano, and welcome to the season premiere of the Montie Moment, which we are going to take to the next level as we wind down the summer and look ahead to the fall and beyond. And we kicked off the new season of the Montie Moment with a look at the new season of college football, which gets going with week 0 on Saturday, August the 26th. But before we get to picking the games, which we will do next week, let's talk about the storylines and what to watch for this year. And boy, there is a ton to get to. I picked 5 storylines that really catch my attention, but again, there's so much more. I could spend 2, 3, 4 hours with you all discussing it. But let's talk about the biggest ones that I feel like going into the season. Number one, the off season, not only in college football, but in all of college sports, has been dominated by the conference realignment movement. And, there's going to be 14 teams in new conferences this season alone, and it's gutted the Pac 12 as we know it. But at the same time, the Pac 12's final season as we know it, I think, is going to be memorable in more ways than one. They have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner in USC quarterback Caleb Williams, who, as long as he stays healthy, looks like he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Also the Pac 12 has teams in Washington and Oregon who are returning senior quarterbacks, with Michael Penix back at Washington and Bo Nix back with the Ducks. Utah, the 2-time defending Pac 12 champions, have quarterback Cam Rising coming back from a torn ACL. And the Utes were a big thorn in USC's side last season, as we saw in both of those matchups. And they have, to me, the best offense and defensive lines in the country. And even UCLA could be very dangerous on offense again, even if it breaks in a new quarterback in potential 5-star freshman Dante Moore. And Oregon State is coming off of a 10-win season last year. So really a dominant conference when you look at it now. Now, just to put it into more detail and perspective, how good was the Pac-12 last season? Well, you had 8 Pac-12 quarterbacks throwing for at least 3,000 yards. 6 of those are back here in 2023. And the only other time that had occurred in an FBS conference was in 2014, also in the Pac-12. Pac-12 also, they have not had a team in the college football playoff since 2016. Is this the year that they break out of that rut? I think there's a possibility they could. So at the very least, it should be an excellent conference race out west in the final year of the Pac-12 as we know it. And that is storyline number 1. Storyline number 2 for me, get ready for some new rules. One thing that has long helped differentiate college football from the NFL was the clock temporarily stopping on first downs. Well, you can say goodbye to that for the most part for the first time since 1968. However, the clock will continue to stop during the final 2 minutes of each half, maintaining at least part of that rule. So you have that. Also, back in April, the NCAA Playoff Rules Committee panel approved 2 other rules that will modestly impact the time of the games. Teams will now be prohibited from calling consecutive team timeouts, and penalties at the end of the first and third quarters will carry over and be enforced on the first play of the next quarter. I'll admit it's going to take some time to get used to this. I'm always used to the clock stopping temporarily when you reach the first downs. It's been a staple of college football, as I said, since 1968. But as far as the impact, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact at all because, really it comes down to the ends of the halves that you see the teams making the move. So I don't think you're going to see that much of an impact at all. I think you'll see games move a little bit quicker, which is the goal of these rule changes. We've seen college football games take 4 hours, mainly due to not only the clock temporarily stopping, the stoppages, but you've seen a lot of offense in college football. But we'll see. Does it make much of an impact? I think it'll speed up the game a little bit. I don't think, though, you're going to see that dramatic of an effect, especially when you see at the end of each half that the clock will temporarily stop on the first downs, which will help the offensive teams out. Number 3, this is also the final season of the college football playoffs 14 format as we know it. Beginning in 2024, the CFP is going to expand to 12 teams. Now, this is the 10th year of the college football playoff as we know it, and we've had only 14 teams playing in the CFP and 5 of them winning it all. Now, the past 2 seasons, though, have showed that the committee is open to putting more teams than just the major ones in. We had Cincinnati make a good run 2 years ago, losing to Alabama. We saw TCU make it all the way to the national championship game, albeit, getting blown out by the 2-time defending champion Georgia Bulldogs, but still they made it to the game, which I think is great for the sport. Whenever you have a great story like that, it's very difficult for them to do it. As we discussed last year on the Montie Moment a lot, TCU, the Horned Frogs, were playing a lot of playoff caliber football to get into that spot. But you know what? The committee got it right, and I think they got it right with Cincinnati 2 years ago. And you know what? With the question marks that coming into this season regarding, perennial stars like Clemson and Alabama, could we see another new surprising team in the Final Four? It's certainly possible. I don't see it this year, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. But anytime you have a school like that make it, I think it's a great storyline going into it. So we'll see what they could do here. So that is storyline number 3. Number 4, speaking of the college football playoff, Georgia has a chance to do something that has never been done in the modern era of college football, and we know obviously not even in the college football playoff, and that's win 3 consecutive national championships. The only three-peat in college football history came all the way back in 1934 to 36 when Minnesota claimed 3 straight national titles. And they entered the season as the favorites to do it, even though they have work to do with new players on both sides of the ball. We saw a ton of their talent get drafted in the NFL draft this past year and in the years before. But you know what? You give Kirby Smart and you give that Georgia team a bunch of credit for the way they recruit and stuff like that, because that's really the name of the game. It comes down to coaching and recruiting, and Georgia has been able to do that. As I said, they lost 10 more starters to the NFL draft this past year. Carson Beck, who was Stetson Bennett's backup last fall, he's the favorite to get the role to start in 2023. He's got a stellar offensive line. He's got an extremely deep group of pass catchers, highlighted by tight end Brock Bowers to work with. The defense, even though they lost a lot again in the draft the last 2 years, it's loaded once again this year with Michael Williams up front, Jamon Dumas-Johnson at linebacker, Mikhail Starks, Javon Bullard, Kamari Lassitier leading the secondary. And like I said, Coach Kirby Smart, he's become the smartest, no pun intended, and the best coach in the game right now. Winning back-to-back titles, which has only been accomplished 13 times in college football history, and by only 8 different teams. So usually when you go for a three-peat, something seems to always go wrong. But you can't bet on the Bulldogs the way that they've been here these last several years. And even just, when you look back at their last 2 years, since the second game of the 2021 season, only 2 teams have come within 9 points of Georgia. And so really when you look at them with the coaching, with so much talent on the roster, and a very favorable schedule, I mean, the table there is set for Georgia to repeat. It's a three-peat, that is, as national champions. Finally, and I mentioned them earlier on in the Montie Moment, but what about Alabama and Clemson coming into 2023? Both schools won 11 games in 2022, but for them had unacceptable seasons. And it's something I documented a lot if you go back and watch last year's Montie Moments about the way that Alabama and Clemson both played, that even though they had won 11 games, and I know Bama's only 2 losses were by combined 4 points, but they had moments that last season that they just did not look like a Nick Saban-led Alabama team. And their 11 wins, even though, again, for most schools that's acceptable, for most schools that's amazing, it was tied for their fewest in their program since 2010. And again, they look worse than that at times. So we'll see how they rebound here. They're tied trying to do something that they have not done before, and that's, if they don't make the college football playoff again, it would be the first time that they did not contend for a national championship across consecutive seasons in the college football playoff era. Nick Saban, it'll be interesting to see what he does this year. In this offseason, they hired Tommy Rees, the former offensive coordinator there from Notre Dame, to fix some things. But to me, when you look at the Alabama team going into this season, the big question is at the quarterback position. Bryce Young moving on to the NFL. Now we've seen they've been able to they've had a few of their QBs these last couple of years turn pro, whether it was Mac Jones, whether it was Tua or Bryce Young. Even at one time when it was there, Jalen Hurts before he transferred, he's now pro. Right now, when you look at their team, it's a 3-man battle for the job. We saw Jalen Monroe play a little bit last year when Bryce Young missed 2 games last season. We saw Ty Simpson. We also have the Notre Dame transfer Tyler Buchner there for Bama. So that's really the question mark with them going into the season, because other than that, I mean, you look at their roster and they don't really have many holes. Their toughest games of the season are all home games, which they always play well at home versus on the road. They always are a different team. So when you look at them back-to-back years of 2 losses, you look at the way that LSU with Brian Kelly after his first year, how he was able to take over and win that epic classic game against them last year. So there's been off-season talk, and there have been signs that Alabama's been declining. I tell you what, though, you doubt Nick Saban at your own risk, and there's definitely some question marks with them. You also look at the other conferences. Um, there's reason to be concerned. There's a reason to doubt, but still, Bama always seems to find a way, so I wouldn't doubt them. Now, the Clemson Tigers, on the other hand, are a whole nother story. When you look at them, they've won the ACC title in 7 of the past 8 seasons, but I think they're in for a serious challenge this year. You look at Florida State. They had a breakthrough 10-win season last year. They have a ton of talent returning on that team. They also used the transfer portal to their advantage, I believe. They made several upgrades at several positions via that portal, and Clemson's coach Dabo Swinney has not really been able to utilize that portal as much, even though there are position groups on the roster that could use some help. And, bunch of teams lose talent to the NFL. I get that. But Clemson has not been able to replace the production that they had from Trevor Lawrence, from their running back position, either and in other spots too. And we saw them struggle last year with DJ Uyunglele, who ended up transferring after this season. The big question, they also did make some changes in the coaching staff position, bringing in Garrett Riley from TCU as their offensive coordinator. But really, when you look at them, almost like Alabama, is Cade Klubnik the answer at QB for Clemson? See, when you look at them, I understand the ACC is not a strong conference, and I think Florida State's going to give them a good run for their money. But when I look at Clemson, to me, there are more questions than answers with them. And to me, with Alabama, Bama's going to be Bama. So the question mark there also is, will it be enough, especially with the 2-time defending national champions who you got to figure are going to be in the playoff discussion and then in there at come December and in January. But you look at a Big Ten that also, to me, is a 3-way battle between Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, and the Pac-12, which is loaded with offensive talent in its final season as we know it. Right now, when I look at Clemson, I think it's very hard for me to find a way that they're going to get into the playoff discussion unless we're seeing some major upsets along the way. So, really, when you look at this season, so many storylines, so many questions, and so much to look forward to in this upcoming season. So, enjoy this final week without college football, without games, because next week it is on. And we will definitely discuss a lot more about it on the Montie Moments coming up this season. For more, like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB. You can follow me on Twitter at MontalbanoNY. And also check out our website at etbpodcast.com and our YouTube channel at youtube.com/etbnetwork. If you like our Montie Moments, please leave us a like. If you're new, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And now more than ever, have your notifications set so you never miss another Montie Moment or another episode of any of our fine shows here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. This has been a Montie Moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano.